A very warm welcome to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. I'm Ritwika Gupta and you're watching our special weekend edition, Super Achievers Making New India, powered by Voicewhat. In this episode, we present two compelling conversations featuring trailblazing companies redefining their industries. In the first segment, we speak to Udit Mittal, founder and MD of Unison International, and in the second segment, we get chatting with Kunal Moktan, co-founder Alt. Now, in the fast-changing world of hiring and talent management, building a legacy of trust and long-term client relationships is no easy task. And under Mr. Udit Mittal's leadership, Unison International has become one of the most respected names in the industry. Today, we'll explore the company's journey, the future of talent acquisition, and Unison's vision for the years to come. Listen in.
The recruitment industry is rapidly evolving, driven by changing business needs and emerging technologies. With India's market projected to reach $48.53 billion by 2030. With emerging technologies like AI, machine learning and blockchain, the demand for skilled professionals is rapidly growing across sectors. At the forefront of this evolving landscape is Unison International, a leading recruitment and executive search firm specializing in connecting top talent with the right opportunities. With a strong client base in e-commerce, FMCG, consulting and real estate, Unison delivers full-cycle recruitment solutions for high and mid-level talent. With over 2 decades of expertise, Unison not only helps organizations build strong teams, but also supports professionals in shaping successful careers. We spoke with Udit Mittal, founder and managing director of Unison International Consulting, to learn more about the company's vision and impact.
Mr. Mittal, welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you today.
Thank you.
So I want to kick this off by asking you to give us an overview of the talent acquisition industry, especially because India's recruitment industry is set to touch $48.53 billion by 2030. So what are the major shifts that you have seen over the years?
So what has happened is today the conventional talent has shifted. It's more towards employer branding. The companies want to create an experience for the employee. The employee is a pampered employee. He or she would want to be pampered. They need to know what they're getting into, and more so, it's a very quick change. The people are not seeing a very long-term career with the company. They're seeing a very they want to cause disruption. They want to join companies which can create disruption in the careers.
Yeah.
And disruption in the sense, join somewhere which is, they can do something very drastically different. They can grow very fast. The company can benefit from them, and that's how talent is shifted. Earlier, the talent used to be very laid back. More loyalty was more preferred and more conventional. They would prefer having a laid back approach. But certainly the talent is they're there. They want to achieve it, move on to the next place, then move to the next place after that. And it goes on.
Speaking of disruption, speaking of digital transformation, actually, AI and data analytics have really impacted the recruitment industry. Tell me, how are you at Unison, leveraging these technologies?
See, we recently trying to invest in technology. We want to become a digital company. But so far, what we benefit from AI, the consultants are required to do only the important part. The basic part is taken care by AI and all the digital part. So now they're more focused on work. There is a better traction of talent. You can, out of the CVs that you get in, you can actually judge which is much better. You can use data analytics to find out which are the more relevant CVs. You can get data from the market of which company, what talent would fit in and what talent would do well there. So this is all happening because of technology. Otherwise, if you do it manually, it takes a lot of time and there could be a lot of ambiguity. And the biasness has been wiped off. Today it's more about what fits into a particular place and what doesn't fit in.
Right. Mr. Mittal, I read that 98% of your clientele are repeat clients, right? And I think that's very impressive. Tell me, what has been your strategy to ensure this long-term sustainability and long-term relationships with clients?
So luckily or unluckily, when I started, most of these the clients that I have today were starting their career. So today they are most of them are CEOs and CXOs and at various places. So that's one advantage that we had. Plus, there's a strong relationship. I believe in maintaining a rapport with them, maintaining a relationship with them. I generally try to answer people within 24 hours of whatever I get. Apart from clients, also candidates also, I would want to reply to them maybe at 11 o'clock at night. You send me a message, you'll get a reply in next 10 minutes or something. So, and I don't leave it to the team. So I'm there to handhold clients and candidates, and these candidates only turn to become clients in future. So the relationship becomes better. And I think in India, it's still we still want to. It's the human touch that will change a lot of stuff, because if you have the human element, if you are good to people, if you have gratitude, people will be very nice to you.
Fantastic. Mr. Mittal, under your leadership, Unison has really earned a very strong reputation. Tell us, how have you maintained this, high culture, high performance in your organization, and what do you look out for when you're hiring your team members?
I tell people to be respectful. I tell people to be nice to people, listen to them, hear them out first of all. And secondly, I give a lot of independence to my team to work. It's not that I want to take all the profit and I want to make all these things. So I invested back onto them. Last year, we gave 3 cars to 3 people who completed 10 years with us. Every year, every 6 months, we take our team, the performers, to one foreign location on a holiday. So plus, we are ready to share the profits. So we made teams which have told them that if you are able to achieve your targets, you can be part of the profit. It's not that I want the profit. And in terms of when we look for people, we look at people who are having the right attitude, who have a lot of patience, and who want to do something well. So I'll purely look for people who are self-driven, who are self-motivated, and want to do something big. And the rest is history. Rest we take care of them.
Right, that sounds like an incredible organization to work at. Who wouldn't want a car? And I think what you said about being motivated is so important. Tell me, now you're focusing on certain sectors, e-commerce, there's retail, there's consumer durables. How are you adapting to the changing demand of these sectors in terms of talent demands? How are you adapting to that?
See, lot of time what happens is these companies are new industries. For example, retail is a new industry in India. It's a new industry because it's developing in a big way. Now it's become more organized. Retail purana tha, but organized retail is changing in a big way, and it is it requires a lot of talent, and a lot of companies are experimenting with talent from other industries. People are coming from FMCG, people are coming from different industries to work here. A lot of focus is going on people who understand the product, understand the talent, who believe in the company, who believe in the product. So we need to have talent which understands the company, the ethos of the company, and the value system.
Right.
Half the time people don't survive because they don't understand the value system. Some companies want people who are hardworking, and you just give a person who's very fancy, and you will not survive in the system. So that's the difference. So we try to find out people who are fitting the company, the culture of the company, and that's how.
Right. The theme for our show this season is powering entrepreneurs for the global stage. We're talking the local to global, conversation in every episode that we do. You're dealing with so many talent, your resumes, you're seeing CVs, How do you think talent in India compares on the world stage, on the global stage?
See, definitely the talent in India is extremely intelligent, extremely sharp, and extremely hardworking. And everyone knows they're all driven, except a few of them, but most of them are driven. They know what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And that's how we, I think the talent this thing. And if you compare the talent, I've seen shows where, they ask who's the president of India, they'll not be able to answer it for you. But in outside countries, that could be a more prevalent thing. But in India, people still have a certain knowledge level, certain skill set, and they are sharp.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of women talent coming up. So what is happening is a lot of women talent is suddenly coming up and replacing the men folks. And women, for some reason, they're more hardworking, they're more sharper, and they are more agile. They're ready to work around the clock. So there is a shift in the talent that way, and certainly a talent from most of the global companies in what we do is pretty sharp, and I think India has a bright future ahead.
Right. And by way of just closing the interview, and as we are wrapping up, tell me, what is your long-term vision for the company, and how do you really see the industry changing in the next 5 to 7 years?
See, how I look at the company is I want to make it more digital first. Digital in the sense the human element has to be there, but a lot of the biasness has to go. A lot of responses have to be digitized. A lot of data has to be used, and data has to be passed on to candidates why they missed out, or what is missing, and why this. So what happens is a lot of consultants, we don't give a feedback unless we'll say rejected, or we'll have user biases and say this is not right. But we need to give a feedback why the talent has gone wrong. Secondly, in terms of long-term vision, I would want I made some certain teams in the company. I want the leaders in the team to run the company. Run it as a company and run it as different verticals, because it's a people's company, so I want people to run it for me, and I want to run it as owners, as entrepreneurs. So when I hire someone, I want an entrepreneur on his seat. So if your stomach is filled and you don't want to achieve, then you will not be able to do it. But if in our place, if people who want to achieve, they can. Most of them, if you come to my office, you haven't come. Most of them come. They're all doing well, and it's a happy lot.
Nice.
And our interference is only to put the guidelines कि ये नहीं करना, बाकी उसके अलावा within that box you can do what you want to. And I want to build up a talent which is self-driven and doesn't need to be monitored. So that's where it is.
Well, all the very best to that vision, and more power to you. Thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, and thanks for coming here.
It's time for a quick break here. We'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. Welcome back to IDFC First Bank presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. You're watching our special weekend edition, SuperAchievers Making New India, powered by Voicewhat. In this segment, we'll be featuring a company called Alt. We'll be exploring the evolving landscape of alternative investments in India and how Alt is using technology to democratize access to this asset class. Pooja Jain brings you this conversation with Kunal Moktan, co-founder Alt.
In today's dynamic investment landscape, alternative investments have gained prominence for offering portfolio diversification beyond traditional stocks and bonds. With exposure to sectors like real estate, private equity, venture capital and hedge funds, alternative investments present a compelling opportunity for investors seeking higher returns and access to exclusive asset classes for portfolio diversification. At the forefront of this shift is Alt, the holding company behind Property Share. With a mission to democratize alternative investments, Alt is helping everyday investors access institutional-grade opportunities at significantly lower minimums. To understand how Alt is redefining access and innovation in the alternative investment space, we spoke to Kunal Moktan, co-founder of Alt.
Kunal, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
And for sake of some context setting and for the benefit of our viewers, walk us through your professional journey to date at Property Share and what ultimately led you to establish Alt, which to my understanding is a platform for alternative investments. What was the market gap, perhaps, that you were looking to bridge at the time?
I started Property Share with my co-founder, Hashim, in 2015. I started my career in 2007 at Blackstone, the private equity fund, or rather the largest alternative investment fund manager today. When we started in Blackstone, it was a $200 billion AUM alternative investment manager. Today, it's almost 1.1 trillion. But we were setting up Blackstone's Asia office back in 2007. Blackstone didn't have Asia presence back at that time in real estate. And three of us rather at the time, started investing out of a global Blackstone fund into emerging market commercial office real estate, mostly in India.
I see.
So I was there for about 8 years, invested close to $1 billion, and we ended up becoming the largest office landlords in the country. So invested with the Embassy Group in Bangalore, the Panchsheel Group in Pune, with Salar Purias in Hyderabad, and so on and so forth. 2015 or 2014, I left Blackstone because I felt like there was a big market gap to allow individual investors to get access to this product. And that's how Hashim and I came together. We were batchmates at IIM Ahmedabad. We started this platform called Property Share to offer the largest alternate within the alternative space, which was real estate, to normal individual investors at a much lower investment threshold, which at that time was 25 lakhs. But when we started Property Share, we didn't start with the vision of doing only real estate. We started with the vision of doing all alternative assets at the time. But because real estate is the largest, and we had done a lot of real estate before that, we said, okay, let's start with real estate, and then we can expand to other alternates going forward. So we did that for almost 10 years now. It's been fairly successful. We manage almost $200 to $250 million of investor capital. And now we've launched a new platform called Alt, which gives investors access to a wider range of alternative products.
Well, sir, I've got a follow-up question for you there. So when you say alternative products or the alternates asset class, in layman language, what does that broadly constitute?
So alternates basically means any asset class which is not your traditional asset class. So a traditional asset class would be, let's say, a fixed deposit, a government security, a bond, or an equity instrument like a stock, which everybody knows and has been investing for decades. An alternative asset is something that's an alternate to these traditional forms of investment. They are slightly esoteric in nature sometimes, and therefore people are a bit more sort of weary of getting into this asset class, but they have given very good returns over the last 20, 30 years. And that's why someone like Blackstone has grown its AUM, almost quadrupled its AUM to $1 trillion, because there's been a lot of allocation from smart capital, which is the pension funds and endowments, etc., to alternates. Could be a hedge fund, it could be a private equity fund, a real estate fund, a commercial real estate, commodities, currencies. Any of these cryptocurrencies today are sort of quite gaining popularity. So anything outside of the traditional sources of capital investment.
Well, you've hinted a bit at why alternative asset classes belong in one's portfolio. But what type of investor is best suited to capitalize on these opportunities? What is their risk profile? Broadly speaking, what are their investment goals? Who is this asset class for?
For the longest time, alternative assets were reserved for slightly sophisticated investors because, like I said, they were illiquid in nature. It required some level of understanding of the underlying capital structures, and therefore, it was reserved for pension funds, etc., etc. But over the last decade, couple of decades, it has become more and more accessible to an individual investor. And now that we know what alternates are and how well they've done, they are now available to a wider group of individual investors. So I would say, of course, if you're a beginner, you're just investing, start with traditional forms of investment. Start with a government bond or an equity instrument or a mutual fund, index fund, etc. But if you're slightly more sophisticated, if you've maybe studied finance, you've been investing for a while, you'd like to diversify your portfolio,
right,
then I think even someone with a few years of experience can look at alternates as an investment strategy in their portfolio.
And it seems to me that that is exactly the sweet spot that Alt is trying to fill, providing access to the alternates asset class to individual investors, correct?
Absolutely.
How does one do so? How does one take that first step? Say they arrive at the Alt platform. What happens next?
So before I get to the process, alternates have become such a large allocation for these investors today. We feel like it's something that one should look to have in their portfolio because it gives superior returns, slightly riskier, but not as risky as one would assume. And therefore, we do encourage that investors have some sort of allocation to alternates in their portfolio. Now, our own platform, which we started with the goal of providing this access to a normal individual investor, because it can all sound very, like I said, complicated and frightening when you hear it first.
It's daunting.
But it isn't, and we feel like it's something that, if it's explained properly, can be very helpful to an investor's portfolio. That's how we started Alt, and the process is very simple. We have a platform called altinvest.ai. You come to the platform, there are various alternates available for you to invest. You could invest in, let's say, rent-yielding commercial real estate, a high-yield product, which is listed today as an SM REIT. You could invest in a UK warehouse directly. You could invest in a public market product, which invests in, let's say, sort of instruments backed by the commercial real estate or residential real estate. You could invest in private credit, which has now become very, very popular, which is on the debt side of the business. And there are returns that range from 8-9% to 20-25%.
Over what time horizon?
Over 3 to 4 years. I mean, every year, right? So that's the kind of IRRs we are talking about. So you can just come to the website, look at one of these opportunities, go through them, speak to someone from our team who will explain it to you, and then just go ahead with a few clicks of the button. You could end up investing in it.
And so what's the next strategic frontier for Alt as a brand? What's the short-term and perhaps the long-term vision that you've inculcated and are looking to fulfill?
I mean, if we look at all the large global investment managers in the alternate space, they've all expanded their product offerings over time as more products have evolved. And there has been some amount of push from the investor community saying, look, this sounds really interesting. I'd like you to allocate my capital to this asset class. For example, cryptocurrencies, which were not there 5-10 years ago, but suddenly sort of, everybody was talking about it. And private credit, for example, is similar. Venture capital investing is very similar. So we would like to do something very similar in Alt. We've started with something we know a lot about, which is real estate. So a lot of our initial alternative universe that is available to the investor is real estate based, whether it's private credit, whether it's publicly listed real estate or private real estate. Sure. But over time, we will offer products like venture investing, which is slightly more riskier but higher return. Right. We will offer infrastructure funds. We will offer tactical opportunity funds. So anything that is opportunistic, which we feel like is something that will give risk-adjusted high returns for investors. So broaden the product offering on the platform as much as possible. It's a global platform. Anybody can invest in anywhere. The greatness of the platform is that you could be an American wanting to invest in commercial real estate in India, or an Indian looking to invest in residential real estate in Japan, or private credit in Europe. Right. You can do all of that on the platform going forward. So the vision is obviously to grow the AUM and the products geographically as well as asset class-wise for all the investors on the platform.
And Kunal, by way of closing comments for other entrepreneurs who may be watching, who may be tuning into this episode, right? What words of advice might you have if they were perhaps struggling to find their footing in this space?
I'm not sure I'm the right person to give that sort of advice, but I guess having been on this journey for about 10 odd years, I always tell people that you should first like what you're doing. You should not get into it just for the sake of there being a gap in the industry. You want to do something or copying someone else that has done something like this in the West, right. Which happened a lot. Yes, some of them have been popular, but unless you really like what you're doing, I feel like you'll not be motivated to do this over a long period of time. And the second thing I always tell them is, you always take your successes and failures very lightly. Sure. You don't get very high when you get success, and you don't get very low when you get failures, because that happens a lot in this business. You get a lot of failures if you sort of get bogged down by it and then fail to see the sort of silver lining in the cloud. Then it can be difficult. And at the same time, the successes can be really, really good, and you feel like, yes, you've conquered everything, you've done a great thing. Right. And if you let that get to your head, then it becomes quite difficult.
So get over the high, get over the low.
Absolutely, balance them.
Well, Kunal, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, and we wish you and the larger Alt team all the continued success.
Thank you very much. Lovely speaking to you.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of IDFC First Bank Presents Leaders of Tomorrow Season 12. We hope you enjoyed the conversations. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.